Hey, fucker. Welcome to the Worst Club. And let's jump in without any bullshit today to rap about generational brain programming, egos, and illusions that wreck our lives. A quick summary of what we've been discussing in the private stream on Patreon. Now, let's back up a few steps. As we talked about way back in the intro to CPTSD episodes, season 1 of this platform, whenever we're considering trauma influenced perspectives, beliefs, lessons, and big takeaways, we really want to consider them as small portions of our psyche, completely removed from the whole. This distance between memory banks can cause or allow those thoughts and memories to grow to extra large, sour shack snack size, or to disappear into a microscopic wound that we're trying not to see or feel. Either way, they will still affect our lives forever until we re-examine, recontextualize, and resize the trauma lesson so that it's appropriately scaled with the rest of our experience and life understanding, and there's some sort of cohesive sense-making story. So in line with our still ongoing but almost complete series on practical steps towards actual self-love, we spoke about how this trauma perspective problem also applies to our core beliefs around specifically love. Our fucked up core love rules, as I'm calling them, fucklers, that stand in the way of us and the experience of human and self connection down the road in the aftermath of trauma. Primarily, we're speaking about what a major problem our fuckler derived perspectives are in the fact that they are often far too small, all about us as particularly, specifically not deserving, disgusting creatures based on an event that transpired or a personal judgment. Or those fuckler perspectives are too large. They don't acknowledge our experience or existence at all. They're so big that these views encapsulate everyone and miss out on us as individuals truly being involved in that crowd. Can you think of areas or people in your life that this thinking might apply to? For example, I'm too doughy to deserve love. That is a too small perspective, which was probably born of some trauma, that rejects the reality of all the humans who are well loved despite physical condition. And it also disregards the inherent worthiness of human beings to be able to meet their basic needs, such as love, regardless of degree of personal perfection. With the too small perspective, the individual is seen as a world apart. The view is too gated. Alternatively, one could say, everyone is too selfish to have real love these days. Or, everyone is too stressed out for real love right now. Those are two big perspectives. One, dickish, the other, extremely compassionate, that cast a judgment or a sympathy across the world and everyone who inhabits it, but miss out on the human who is speaking and instead project that experience onto the collective whole. Who's really too selfish to have real love these days? Probably the person who's saying that. In both cases, though, the point is the perspective creates an illusion, a definitive policy within the universe that probably benefited the beholder at some point. They developed that fuckler in reaction to some event for their self-protection, either to fully apply with a small, obsessive, highly personal perspective, or to fully avoid with a large, impersonal, ignorable perspective, some lesson from life. But over time, whether that perspective is too big or small, the trauma lesson loses its utility as it puts a bottomless gap between the individual and their human needs. Then it causes them to lose their emotional stability. Then it often causes them to become trauma factories themselves as they reel. So all of that being said, we want to understand our fucklers' fucked up core love rules by checking their sizing, by looking for logical holes when they're blown up or shrunk down. Then we can understand what might be holding us back in so many aspects of life. Trauma knows no bounds, but in particular, for this series, in the Department of Positive Human Relating. This is a very CPTSD problem, and a good place to start fixing it is examining the breadth, depth, and transitive property of firmly held beliefs about worth. Does this rule apply to everyone that I have created for myself? Does this rule that I have created for everyone also apply to me? And how can I iron out the reasonable bugs between those perspectives when my mind may have done something a bit janky 25 years ago? Come hang out in the big stream. These recent series shows and early releases have tons of prompts to walk you through this work. To go even deeper, one of the ways that we might want to further explore this perspective hang-up is by looking at egos. The egos of us and the people who raised us to start with, which is another thing that we've been working on through generational narcissism discussions for a couple of years now. So here's the thing. An ego is the perceived boundary between two people, or the assessed distance between an individual and some generally vague mental representation of the world population. An ego is how unique or special or set apart a person thinks that they are from everyone else. That can be especially positive or especially shit-tainted. A big ego does not mean a big sense of self-esteem. It just means a big gap between self and other. So you can see why egos factor into our love perspectives and obstacles. If you're too different from all other people, a big ego and a small perspective, you either deserve all the love or none of the love. And both can be a hindrance to acquiring the real thing. On the other hand, if you're not different from anyone at all, a small ego and a big perspective, then you don't even register as a discernible candidate for love. So, no, of course you can't have it or let it in. You see this interplay. Big trauma problems of perspective challenges, sense of self, and relationship issues, all wrapped together like the gift that, similar to Bridger Winegar, no one asked for. One of the best ways to understand what might have happened with your undesired gift of trauma problems and ego is to understand what happened between you and your parents or early care providers in the area of personal boundaries and sense of self. that ego. So the size of the parent's ego will correspond with the developing ego of the child. The child will either take on the same characteristic or reject the parental model and opt for the opposite option, i.e., a big ego parent can create a big ego child, another narcissist of covert or grandiose variety. Or a big ego parent can create a small ego child, probably a codependent and avoidant individual who winds up in victimizing ships. Depending on how the kid was allowed to adapt in the household, in the family system. Were they encouraged to be like mom/dad? Or did they have to adapt in corresponding, perhaps acquiescing shapes around the overbearing qualities of mom/dad? And vice versa. It works the same way with a small egoed parent. They can produce a big or small egoed progenitor, depending on the other circumstances allowed for that kid, who that child was shown or permitted to be. So this ego tracking done through the generations, it can be a bit brain scrambling. It can be complicated, but important work if done with a realistic lens. Grasping how we developed in accordance with the framework that was already around us, the personalities and their established interpersonal exchange patterns. That's a huge step in comprehending how we are, maybe accidentally turning out just like dank old mom and dad, or doing everything we can to be the opposite of them, which usually puts us on the same axis of behaviors and makes us just like them anyways, but backwards. Or it has us still responding to them as ghosts who we are in relationship with more than our real current day relationships. Yeah. You know how brains work. If we don't deal with these patterns, we're doomed to be psychically trapped with our parents in one way or another. Which brings me to one final point in this summary of recent action. An advanced mini-sode that I threw at the big trauma thinkers. It goes like this. With every event, we have 4 common trauma responses. The first time around, we avoid or adopt the lesson being shown to us. The second time around, we adhere or abandon that lesson. And so the family fuck around continues forever, creating similar beings even through opposite action, unless we exit the trance-like state that humans most commonly function in, with unexamined perspectives leading the way, unaware of what we are automatically choosing to do by living like this. To escape that zoo, escape the 4 A's of trauma responses. There are never only 2 choices or 2 major takeaways to select from. It is never adopt or avoid, adhere or abandon. But generally, 2 options are what the brain immediately assesses under pressure. So when that happens, we need to stop, reset emotional and cognitive states, and seek the third and beyond option that exists in every situation. This is how you break out of dangerous or dissatisfying patterns, such as having too big or too small of an ego or trauma perspectives. And this is how you become conscious. This is how you live your own life after trauma. For a lot more help thinking about these trauma illusions, delusions, and self-destructive, inaccurate lessons learned, such as those that stand between you and experiencing love, maybe hit up that free episode on trauma thoughts that lives on the Patreon page, patreon.com/traumatized motherfuckers. Just hit join for free and you'll find it in the Back to Basics collection. I think it's a helpful little intro and it is waiting for ya. So is actually a lot of otherwise unannounced change. Traumatized Motherfuckers is expanding, but you won't hear about it on the socials or here, really. I am officially done with a lot of these public speaking options until things change positively. So these days, Patreon is the place to engage, to get more information about community and new topical releases that will not be shared here, and more. In case you're on the market for a little anti-establishment shit talk combined with narcissism research, oh, it's there. It's there, fucker. Behind our closed little curtain. And we have one more episode on that, at least, coming down the pipes in March. At which point, I'd love to start talking about environmental illness and self-loathing at the end of the world that we thought we lived in. How harsh or rapidly changing circumstances can create a corresponding cognitive environment that gets turned around on the brain holder. So, with all of that going on in the background, fuckers, who couldn't use a little spot check for weirdly sized perspectives, thick or non-existent boundaries between self and other, and crippling blind spots a la the people who raised us, to ensure personal self-development rather than respawning of an opponent you thought you'd already gotten away from. I could use all those things. Maybe you too. If so, come on by. Hit up those trauma perspective sods if you're on the market. Hit up the Patreon to learn about new community if you are ready to rethink socializing online safely. And hit up your fucked up core love rules. Fucklers, if you're trying to unscramble the Rubik's Cube that is actual self and other love. Hail yourself. Thanks for being here. I'll talk to you next month or sooner if you want. And until then, cheers, fucker.